I wanted to show you how to make a classic Genoise sponge. So this is a classic sponge. It's used in patisserie. It originates from Italy, but it's used across French patisserie in loads of ways. The way that you might find it most commonly is in a layered gâteau. So if you see those beautiful layered gâteaux and they've got all the lovely layers with the cream and the jelly, one of those layers would be a Genoise sponge. And that's also what you'd use to make a Fraisier cake, so that gâteau with the strawberries around the edge, and lots of other decadent patisserie. So I'm going to show you how to make it. So the first thing I've done is I have preheated my oven to 170 degrees, that's a fan oven, or 170. And I'm going to get all my ingredients ready. So I've got a couple of lined tins here. So the recipe I've made for you today is actually for one 8-inch tin. But what I had here was 6-inch tins, so I've just done 2 smaller tins. And I'm going to start by sieving my flour. So I've got 125 grams of plain flour here. You can use gluten-free plain flour, which works really well, and you can also make a chocolate Genoise sponge by using 100 grams of plain flour and 25 grams of good quality dark cocoa powder. So I'm going to sieve this flour. It's important to sieve the flour for this. We want to make sure there's absolutely no lumps. We want it as fine as possible, fine as we possibly can. So much so that we're going to give it 2 sieves. So you see I just sieved it onto that piece of baking paper there. This is how I used to do it in professional kitchens. This is just an effective way of getting the paper back into the bowl. Not the paper, the flour. Then I'm going to give it another sieve to make sure that it's extra light, extra fine, and ready to make the lightest, most loveliest Genoise sponge ever. So this Genoise sponge is made by whisking together whole eggs and caster sugar, and those whole eggs and caster sugar are going to get whisked up for a really long time. So I've got 4 eggs and 125 grams of caster sugar, and before I started the video I had been whisking that with this hand mixer for about 10 minutes, and you can see in the bowl there that it's like clouds. It's like lovely thick clouds. I'm going to carry on whisking that for a little bit longer, because what we're looking for in this egg and sugar mixture is ribbon stage. So what that means is if I lift up my some mixture with the mixer, and I ribbon it out and I make a figure of 8 into my bowl, the figure of 8 will hold itself by the time I get back round to the 8, by the time I've drawn my 8. Okay, so let's have a look in there. So I'm holding it up. Can you see that ribbon? It holds itself on the surface. Okay, so I'm going to carry on whisking for a little bit longer. You can see I'm moving the bowl around a little bit, moving it around, making sure all of that mixture is getting seen by the whisk. You can also do this in a freestanding mixer with a whisk attachment. So just for the last bit of mixing on here, I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla extract and a pinch of salt. Sorry, the salt was behind the camera. It's a pinch of salt, and I'm just going to give it another last little whisk. Bowl now. So bear in mind I had pre-whisked this for about 10 minutes before I started the video, but so yeah, that process takes about 10 minutes. You can see, can you see just in there, can you see it's like wobbly, it's got sort of like a wobbly, almost jelly-like consistency, and if we lift it up it holds its shape on the surface. Okay, So that's how I know that my whisked egg is ready. So I'm just going to try and get the last bits of egg and sugar off the end of the whisk without hitting the sides of the bowl. We don't want to lose any of that air we just spent all that time putting in. Okay. And then the next stage is we're going to add in our flour. So we're going to do this in 2 halves. I'm going to sprinkle half of the flour onto the surface of the whisked mixture. And some people say use a metal slotted spoon. I like to use a whisk. And we're going to fold that flour through the egg and sugar. So I'm going to get my whisk underneath the flour in the bowl and sort of shake it about. I'm going to fold my whisk through the mixture and give it like a little wiggle, and that's going to help the flour to disperse through the mixture. Okay, I'm turning my bowl, I'm cutting through with the whisk, folding that flour in. Okay, I'm being so gentle here. And once that first batch of flour is all mixed through, we're going to go in with our other half of our sieved flour. So we're going to sprinkle that onto the surface there. And then I'm going to get my whisk underneath and sort of shake it a bit to start shaking that flour into the mixture. Can you see what I'm doing there? Sort of give it a little bit of a wobble. A mindful wobble. Give it a little bit of a shake. And then you're going to carry on with that folding technique. So it's cutting through the middle and then folding it back on itself. Cutting through the middle, fold it back on itself, and you can turn the bowl. It's going to help with the folding technique. Okay, keep gently folding. You're going to keep going with that until you can't see any more flour lumps. Okay, keep going. Got to be so super gentle here. We don't want to lose any of that air. The air is what's going to make our cake so light in the oven, and the egg is what's going to help it rise. If we start knocking too much air out of there, we'll end up with a dense sponge, which is the opposite of what we want with a Genoise. Okay. Remember, don't tap the sides of the bowl. You can just put any excess bits in there. I'll show you in here. So now I've got my mixed sponge mix. I'm going to evenly divide that between my 2 tins. Very gently pour it into the tins. Okay. Try and get it as even as you can so they cook at roughly the same time. Okay, last little bit out of that one. And I'm just going to use a palette knife just to smooth off the top. Because this doesn't have any fat in it, there's no butter, there's no fat, this sponge won't work itself out in the oven like a traditional creamed sponge would. So the position that you leave it in the tin will be its final position, if you know what I mean. So if it's all bumpy and mounded in the middle, it will bake like that. So you need to spread it out so that it's as flat as you can get it. It will spread out a little bit, but it just not as much as a buttery sponge would. And I think that one's got a little bit more actually, so I'm just going to transfer over there a bit. There we go. And I'm doing as minimal messing around with these sponges as I possibly can. Okay. So they're in the tins. I'm happy that they're ready to go. This size, I'm going to bake in the oven. I'm going to start with about 25 minutes, and then I'm going to check them. What I'm looking for is risen and golden brown, okay, and firm and springy to the touch. I will show you what these look like when they come out, but for now I'm just going to pop these in the oven. So they went in on the middle shelf. I'm going to put my timer on and I will be back to show you the finished sponges.